Alright folks, we're going to talk conclusions of the putty making videos. Now I do have one complication while making these videos. You guys notice I was just looking down. Thunderpaws is here and he's in active mode. So he's going to be all over everything. Anything that moves, he's right on it. Anyhow, here's my conclusion to the putty videos. Now I really didn't talk about what putty I preferred while we were making the video. Part of that is because I didn't know myself. Now you just saw little random clips here and there of me working with the different putties. And while I was making the videos, I was evaluating and thinking and trying to decide what would make a good putty. Weren't we, Thunderpaws? Yeah. Okay. And you saw the conclusion where in some places the putty worked and some places it didn't. Well, I wouldn't say didn't. It didn't do 100% good job. I need to touch them up some. So let's start talking about what makes a good putty. First off, hardness. Okay? Is the putty harder than the plastic or softer than the plastic? If it's harder than the plastic, then you're going to have some problems. Like the Aves. Aves was curing harder than this plastic. So I have some lines right here where the Aves was in certain spots where I'm going to have to go back in and sand it again, like right there. You can see the Aves left marks there because the Aves is harder than the plastic, so it's harder to get rid of. Okay? Softer than the plastic's good, but you don't want it so soft it crumbles and just falls apart as you're sanding it. Okay? So you want it just a little bit softer than the plastic itself. That's what you want. Alright? So I'm going to do that with a scale. Negative numbers mean softer than the plastic. Positive numbers mean harder than the plastic. So when we get to each putty one at a time, I'm going to go through all these different characteristics and give them values. Alright? So again, 0 softer than plastic. Negative softer than plastic. Positive's harder than the plastic. 0 means it's the same hardness as the plastic. Okay? The next one is curing time. Curing time is important because if it takes 3 days for your putty to cure, you're not getting any work done. It's just sitting there on your bench. Like this guy. He's been sitting on my bench for a little while because life has been in the way and I haven't touched him. It has nothing to do with not wanting to work on it or not. Thunderpaws has had something to do with that, to be honest. Nelly has a lot to do with that, but that's a good thing. Not a bad thing. Okay? So curing time. I'm going to rate them all on curing time. I'm also going to rate them all on ease of application, ease of use. Like, is the Aves easier to use than Mr. Surfacer? Okay? Stuff like that. The last thing I'm going to rate them on, well, application. I'm also going to rate in application finish. Okay? In other words, does it sand out smooth? Is it easy to sand? That goes with hardness, I know, but that has a little to do with it. And I'm also going to tell you the thinner you use, the thin down the putty. Alright? So let's get started with my long-term favorite, well, new favorite, Aves Epoxy Sculpt. I'm looking off the side because I wanted to get a can to show everyone. Aves Epoxy Sculpt. Okay, hardness is harder than the plastic, so I'm going to give it a +1. It's not much harder than plastic, but it is. It's harder than resin, too. Not much, but a little bit harder than the resin. I didn't have too much trouble shaping the Aves on that one to match the contours, whereas I'm having it here. So it might just be the characteristic of the model. That might actually be a bigger divot there than I'm willing to admit. Hard to say until I get really into it. I can tell where my finger of it, the Aves is up above the plastic, however. So I'm going to say Aves is harder than the plastic, so I'll give it a +1. Curing, it was the longest curing time. It takes 3 to 4 hours to cure. You put your Aves down, let it cure for quite a while before it's hard. Okay? I just realized I missed a category. It sticks to the model quite well once you let it cure. That goes under ease of use. Okay? Sticking too. Putty's no good if it doesn't stick to the model really well. Alright? Ease of use. I gave it a +4 on application. Mainly because you thin it with water and you can get it into almost any consistency right there. Apply it and let it dry. Which means you can smooth it down really well. Water's abundant. It's cheap. It's easy to use. It's non-toxic. The AVES itself, while the label says use gloves while you work with it, I never do. I'm probably going to die of cancer in 10 years. Who knows? It says use gloves when you're working with it. I never do. But I wash my hands profusely afterwards to make sure they're really good and clean. So the AVES, I gave it a pretty good application score because it is easy to use. You mix the two parts together, you need some water into it, you can beat it out into a tiny little thin bead, apply it to your seam so it's only right on your seam. It doesn't get better than that. The other putties you can't do that with at all. Okay? And again, the bad part about AVES is it's harder than the plastic. So now we move on to the Squadron White putty, which I don't have any examples of there nor over in Easy Grasp because, well, I had to kitten proof the house the other day, and you don't want certain things laying around for a kitten to chew on. If you do, you don't have a kitten for very long. It's just the way it is, and they chew on things because they're curious. Okay, here's the Squadron White putty. Now, hardness. I gave it a -3. It's definitely softer than the plastic. It's much softer than the plastic. Okay? Curing time. It's about 10 to 20 minutes. That's not too bad. You do your putty work, go watch a half-hour TV, come back, you're back to model building. You don't have to wait 3 or 4 hours. Curing time's actually pretty good on this stuff. In fact, I've had it actually cure on me. Like if I'm working a seam this big, I apply my Squadron, working my way this way, and by the time I hit this end's cured and ready to sand, and I can sand this way as it's curing. It cures pretty fast. That's a bonus. And I think it cures pretty fast because it's using fingernail polish. Acetone-based fingernail polish as it's thinner. And that stuff vents pretty good. And that is one problem. And that's why I didn't rate it as good as AVES on the application. I gave it a 2. And I gave it a 2 on the application because of 2 things. The thinner, you know, that has some volatile chemicals in it, and it's not necessarily good to breathe that stuff. 2, it's too soft. If you're not careful, you can over sand it and your seam reappears. Okay? So I didn't score it as well as the AVES. Right now I'd use AVES over this stuff. It just didn't do very well. Alright? It does stick to the model quite well. So, you know, stickiness is good. But I just can't rate it as well as the AVES. Alright. Yes, I am reading from notes. I wanted to get all this right. Next up, Bondo Spot Putty. Okay? It's very similar in application to the Squadron. I don't know if I got that on camera. There. It's very similar in application to the Squadron in the fact that it uses the same thinner, acetone-based fingernail polish remover. Okay? It's as sticky, if not stickier to the model than Squadron. It has a better consistency than Squadron. Its hardness, it's harder than the Squadron. It's not as hard as the plastic though, which is a bonus. So I gave it a -1 on the hardness. Curing time, I couldn't tell you because my tube was slightly messed up. You saw that in the video. So I don't know what the curing time is. Okay? But it cured fairly quickly. Okay, finish. I gave it a better finish than the Squadron. I gave it a +3 for finish because it sanded better. It sanded smoother. I like it better. It's designed for working with automobiles, and this is the spot putty there. Glazing and spot putty. And again, it's designed for working with automobiles. This is designed for little areas, so it's got to cure a little harder than the Squadron does. It's not harder than the plastic though, which is good. I rated it just a little bit softer than the plastic. Okay? So I rated this on application a +3. It's right below the AVES in my opinion for ease of use. Alright? Now we get to the shave sprue, where you shave off pieces of the sprue and use your glue to apply it. I wasn't real good with that because that was my first attempt. It does work. Its hardness is 0 because it is the same plastic you're using. You're just gluing strips of plastic over your gaps. Its curing time was about 30 minutes, which is not a good curing time to me. I want something that cures faster. I'm not sure about that Bondo. I'm going to have to get a good tube and try that. But it's better than the AVES on curing time. Its finish is the plastic. Okay? Its thinner is the hottest glue you can find. So, you know, use some Tenax or some Pro Weld and you can use shave sprue. I'm not going to give it as good of ease of use as the Bondo or the Aves. I gave it a 2 for ease of use, simply because it's going to take some skill to get that to work right, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad method, not at all. It's a different method. And I think if I went and bought some evergreen stock, little tiny thin rods of evergreen, I would have a much easier time of this. Just cut off bits of the evergreen and glue them down on my seams and then sand them smooth. I think I would have an easier time of it if I did that. Okay? So I'm not going to rate it that bad. I rate it better in the Squadron, but not greatest. Now we get to Mr. Surfacer. Now first off, this is not a putty. It's a thick primer. Very, very different things there. Okay? I have some Mr. Dissolve putty on back order. It was supposed to be here by now, so I could give it a try, compare and contrast. One of my subscribers already did that. I'm going to put a link to his video in the description, so you guys can go look at the compare and contrast between Mr. Surfacer and Mr. Dissolve putty. Okay? Now, Mr. Surfacer, I give it a hardness of -1. It is softer than the plastic. It's harder than Squadrons. It sands up really nice. It's real easy to use. Okay? Curing time's 10 to 15 minutes. It's not overly long. It's definitely something to use when you're working with seams. It's not for working with every seam, however. Okay? And here's why. You can't take care of really big, huge gaps with that thing, with this stuff. It's not designed for that. It's designed for bad scratches. Having said that, when you have a really small little seam you need to fill, this is what I grab. Because you just paint it on, let it dry, sand it off. Paint it on, let it dry, sand it off. Okay? And that's really, really nice to use it that way. But it won't handle big gouges in the plastic or nothing like that. So I only gave it an application of +2. I only gave it a score of +2. Okay? It's good, but it has limited use. Now, micro bubbles, like I have on the Brachyri over here. You can see that's what I used to fill the micro voids. It was wonderful with the micro voids. It got in here and just slammed those suckers right out of existence. 2 applications, some light sanding, they're gone. Speaking of which, here is the real use for Mr. Surfacer. Put Squadron down. Well, not reuse. This is what I first started using it for. Put Squadron putty down. Squadron putty will leave you a little groove if you oversand it a little bit, like I've got running on this guy. Okay? And then what you do is you hit it with Mr. Surfacer and it fills that little groove. And then you've got a nice, neat seam. So that's what I use Mr. Surfacer for. And by the way, it's thinner, is lacquer thinner. Very volatile chemicals, not something you want to breathe. You want to use this in a well-ventilated place. Don't use it in a small, tiny, enclosed room. You're going to have headaches, you're going to have all sorts of things. The fumes from that are mighty strong. Alright? You saw me using it at my work table, but that was for the video. What you didn't know is I have a ceiling fan that's running the whole time I'm using it. And a really quiet fan in the doorway sucking air out of here. So I'm not sitting trapped in these fumes. Well, conclusion. What putty would I use? I'm going to use a combination. I'm going to use Aves Epoxy Sculpt where I can. I just like the convenience and the fact that I can smooth that stuff right into the seam almost perfect with my fingers and have minimal sanding when I'm done. You can do that with some of these other putties, but the Aves cures up a little bit better to me, stronger. And you saw in the video I actually used it to glue 2 parts together with. You can't do that with this other stuff. Okay? So it acts like a weak glue, a weak epoxy glue. So I'm going to go with the Aves first. After that, the Bondo. And both of them get in combination with Mr. Surfacer to finish up my seam filling. So there you go. There's the conclusion to this putty video. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something useful. Hope my conclusions were good. Leave me comments. Let me know. And I will see you with the next video.
Real cat trees. They look like trees for cats, but they're inside.